Now we're going to start into the real meat of Six Sigma and give you the first introduction to what do we mean by DMAIC, or Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control. This is the core process of Six Sigma thinking and working and dealing with both project management and problem-solving processes. So first I want to take you through this as a problem-solving process. We'll come back in another module. We'll then talk about as a project management process that drives us to the states of a structured management approach towards problem solving. So what we see is the project management process is also like an analysis roadmap. And there's a process guide. What we're going to do is we're going to have questions, and the questions will drive us to a method that addresses how to understand the questions, how to interpret it, and from that we get learning, and that will lead to a new question. Albert Einstein said, if only I have the right question, if only I had the right question. Finding an answer is much more about defining the question than it is about searching for the solution. And so what we see is each of these 5 phases is structured as a linear process. Now in reality it's not linear. There are lots of feedback loops and iterations, and we may have a discovery in a subsequent stage that causes us to go back and rethink what we had learned in a prior stage. So it's presented as a linear process mostly for clear understanding. It begins with the idea of define. And so the input to define is management's direction. Maybe we have to fix something. Management takes a look and says, this process is a bottleneck. Can you get rid of some of the process steps? Another thing, it may be there's a critical dissatisfaction measure where this process is not actually satisfying its customers. Another problem may be we take a look at customer data and the outcome, maybe field failure rate. It says there's something happening in this process that's creating a failure for customers. Or maybe we look at the historical process data and we say this process is not actually at a state of control that gives us predictable outcomes. Each of those is sort of an entry-level condition to define. We're trying to understand what's important to the customers, what is expected of the performance of this particular work, and then what sort of data do we have that tells us what it is. So the idea in define is to set the boundary conditions, to understand what are the requirements of the customers, what are the things we have to do, and explore the data. Because what we have, as I'll say, is dirty data in messy processes. The outcome of this is a project charter. So the project charter is the definition of what it is we are contracting to do with the management, the process owner typically, to be able to make a change in the process. What is the problem we're going to do? What's included? What's excluded? In what time frame we will do it? Who's going to be engaged on the team? And all of these sorts of things. We then move into the measure phase. And so in the measure phase, we're asking, what's the best we've done? What has been our process as it existed in the past? How well did it deliver? What's our benchmark internally? So what was our best of our best in terms of doing it? Oh, what was the worst of the worst? And we take a look and say, what was the difference? How was the process operating in those two? What were the performance measures and the outcomes? How have they changed over time? And then how can we actually define the graphical representation, the visual way the process works, and then what data do we collect and how well is it performed, and how does that relate to the way our processes function? So we have to understand our measurement system. Is it good enough to give us data quality that allows us to make good observations and draw astute judgments about what we need to do to improve? So the output of this is a baseline performance. We know where we are. We know what the gaps in performance are. We know the areas where there needs to be concentration, but we haven't analyzed it fully. So we go into the analyze phase. In this phase, what we're trying to understand is what's the difference in variation within logical subgroups of the process versus between them. So we may take the process in a series of steps and say at each step, what's the performance? How consistent is it? How balanced is the flow across those? Is quality created or is quality destroyed or mitigated in each of the subsequent steps? How data is actually performing in there. And we start looking at the process as a series of probabilities, a series of time flows, a development over time of quality, an accumulation of cost in the process. And we want to build some logical models about the process. We might track one-piece flow using lean methods. We might analyze that with regression analysis or analysis of variance to understand what's actually happening in the process. And so as a green belt, you'll be choosing the tools. You'll be guiding the team through the use of those applications. And the output of the analyze phase is we should have a set of critical sources of variation identified. We should understand the priorities of things that we need to take a look at for improvement. And we then take that into the improve phase. In the improve phase, we're going to do some demonstration testing. This is where we actually apply some analytical principles to say, which states are better? Which settings are better for the process? And what can we do better? And we'll see what are the things that need to be done to make this process even more effective, consistent, and delivering the level of value that's the outcome that we want to have. And so the outcome of this experimentation phase in improve is the idea of this is the level of improvement we can achieve by doing exactly these things. And we have a confirmation experiment that we do that tests and pilots this in the real world. And by engaging the workers in the process, in this whole discovery process and the testing, what we do is we get them so that they feel like this is something they've done. By having the supervisor of that process or the process owner engaged as the, if you will, manager of the project, what we've done is we've given them the ownership for the corrective actions. And so this is transferring that desire to make change happen from you as a green belt, because you have this technical understanding of the process, to the whole team and the managers of the process. The idea in control state is then, how do we create that set of conditions that will allow this process to stay in a state of control once it's transformed into full operations on a regular basis? In other words, it's returned back to standard work. So in control phase, what we have is, are there some statistical methods we have? Are there some training aids we need to provide to the workers? Is there specific training operators need to have? Is there some change that we have to the documented work standards that we have? What are going to be the measures we use, and are those measurements sound measurement systems? So the outcome of this is a performance improvement that's been validated in the process. It's ready for implementation. And when we have those new work standards, what we want is the workers to actually be the ones who write it, because then they become committed to that new level of work. And so the next question we might have is, can we leverage the lessons we have from this particular project to other projects like this in the organization? And that's where, as an engineer, we can start seeing those similarities and say, you know, we can actually improve substantially the performance of the whole organization if we take this lesson and replicate it in these other places. So that's going to be the challenge of managing this, if you will, as a problem-solving process. So we're going to take a look now, what do we mean by problem statements? What are the different types of problems? And then how do we actually do this in terms of the project management approach at each of those define, measure, analyze, improve, and control milestones or gates, if you will, in this process of performance. So again, we'll continue the lectures in just a little bit.